At first glance, it may seem that the information security management, or the management of technical controls and operations and practices, that seems a little counterintuitive. Everybody is always thinking about the gadgets, the firewalls, the intrusion detection systems, the spam filters, the antivirus software. They're always thinking about the technical solution. The gadget, the system, or the software is going to save the day. And it's really the reality of information security, aka cybersecurity effectiveness, is more about people and about process and about how we operate than anything else. I did send this over the weekend because I had thought about you, and I just wanted you to know that there are times when I see stuff here and there. And can everybody hear this? For those of you that may not be aware, what we're witnessing here is likely a situation that involves either a back door, or otherwise referred to as a Trojan sometimes, where what's installed on a system is something known as a keylogger. So as somebody's clicking or remote access where they're viewing, right? So they're capturing keystrokes. This kind of thing is often called a man-in-the-middle attack. This one threw me. I had to watch it a couple of times. I'm like, why is he wearing jewelry now? Like,
I'd like a loan, please.
If you're careless with your details, they could be used to steal your identity.
Yeah, of course. I have all the details in my.
so yeah, progressive steps of stealing someone's identity. Now, the other thing that I love about this is that it's a segue to a channel that's sponsored by a UK interest for cybersecurity. And here's one about a coffee shop. So I gotta encourage you, take some time to watch these action fraud videos, because they're only a couple of minutes, but they're real eye openers. They were very artfully conceived. And this is the kind of thing where it's like, you don't think about this. I don't know how many times I've been in a coffee shop, or I've been in a gift shop, or I've been in a hotel lobby, right? And I'm just talking, or an airport, right? In an airport, and that's really bad. So exposure is about risk. And I know we've talked about exposure and all of that, but I want you to watch this one, How Private is Your Personal Information? And then there's this other one that I really love right here. And for me, I love this because the same actor's involved, but it draws out this stark contrast about our digital methods now as opposed to the previous generation, okay? And how some of those old school methods are still painfully effective. Watch this.
Hi, Mrs. Walker.
Yes.
Hi, Mrs. Walker. I'm from your bank. It seems there's been some unusual activity in your account.
Really?
Don't you worry about it, Mrs. Walker. We'll soon sort that out for you. Before we continue, I just want to go through some security questions with you.
Oh, yes, of course.
Okay, can you please tell me your password?
Normally you only ask for 2 digits.
But due to the nature of the circumstances, I'm afraid we're going to have to go with a slightly higher security clearance.
Oh, yes, of course, sorry. 723-327.
What I'm going to do is I'm just going to put you on hold for a little moment, and we'll get this all sorted out for you. Okay.
Oh, yes, that's fine.
Hello, Mrs. Walker.
Yes.
That's all sorted out for you. You have a good day, Mrs. Walker.
Actually, can I just ask you? You wouldn't give your information to a stranger. Don't do it over the phone. For advice and guidance on keeping your details safe, visit actionfraud.police.uk.
Now, obviously, if somebody's sitting there in person, I want you to understand the perception of risk. And this is huge. And this is something that we need serious attention and thought about, because
Electrify your metabolism back to teenage levels by eating 1/2.
okay, we're gonna stop that now. All right, so I want you to consider that when Game of Thrones was compromised to the tune of $75 million worth of loss for HBO, it is solely because a senior vice president was in the comfort of his own home, sitting in the privacy of his living room, surfing his private network out to the internet, confident that because of his surroundings, was he exposed? He didn't think he was exposed because of his physical surroundings. You understand what I'm saying? Our perception of exposure and risk are a serious challenge in information security, because what we perceive directly, physically, intuitively, is not the actual case when we are working online, because we are connected to a global internet, right? And there are bad guys here. Now, I think I've shared with you that in system security last spring, we had a live solution we were walking through, and it was time for a student to walk through the same solution I had just demonstrated, and they were hacked by someone from Russia. And so we actually looked up the reverse IP address of the connection and determined that it was from Moscow, Russia. And that's on the screen in the middle of the class. And there were over 900 attempts in a few hours to break into a student system in our systems security class. Now, the point I'm trying to make is everybody's warm and fuzzy and snuggly in their bunny slippers, watching, sipping their, whatever, watching their favorite program streaming online, right? Hulu, Netflix. Everybody's watching Bridgerton and having fun, right? They're all having a good time, oblivious to the idea that we're connected to a international network that is loaded with skillful people. Yes.
So earlier today, I got a text on my phone saying that my Amazon account was locked due to like suspicious activity, and it sent a link saying that to go to this link to unlock it from one account.
So Sulaiman was just sharing, I hope you don't mind, because you're talking through a mask from a distance. So for those of you on St. Thomas, Sulaiman just shared that he received a link about his Amazon account being hacked, and he was encouraged to launch the link. And we're all gonna ask with bated breath, did you? Did you? Did you click the link, Sulaiman? Did you?
No.
No, he says no.
Both of my Amazon accounts aren't linked to my phone.
Right.
I wouldn't receive anything from Amazon.
So Sulaiman just referenced the fact that both of his Amazon accounts are not tied to his cell phone. So why would he be getting something like that? And that's a great tell. That's a great indicator. And that has to do with awareness. So when we're talking about EAT, which for our textbook author is SEAT, right? Wasn't it? Oh, it was SETA, SETA, right? So it's security, education, training, and awareness. The awareness comes last, after the education, after the conceptual, after the education comes training. Okay, how do you translate these concepts, these ideas into action? What do we do with two-factor? How do you implement two-factor? One of the simple things we're going to ask you to do in this class is to implement two-factor authentication if you haven't done so already, right? So What I'd like to do, though, is launch as quickly as possible into risk management. And I want to emphasize again, you're going to see a lot of high-level concepts about risk management, but in the back of your mind, I want you to remember that although this seems far removed from the nitty-gritty, risk management's main value is that it helps you translate cyber tech into risk. That a person with money, a person in charge of something, their administrative, their financial, the stakeholders who are making the decisions have the tools, have the plain information in plain English to make an informed decision. You will see by the time we finish this class, you are equipped to purchase darn near anything. If you set this, okay, so I might have to erase that part before I post it on YouTube, because then all the finance and administrative people are going to go, oh, he's trying to pull a fast one. He's trying to pull the wool over my. No, it's more like we're trying to help you understand the reality of the risk. If you frame the risk level that is significant and imminent in the right fashion, a blind, brainless, deaf person could walk out of the room and not do anything and still sleep at night. But anyone who had sight, had hearing, had sensibilities, they could not go home and feel good about, okay, well, he wants us to buy this thing. And I really don't know if that thing is important. Right? It can be as simple as we need more disk space. OMG. Why do you need more disk space? Well, because we're running out of backup. We're running out of space for backups. Well, we have backups. We have disks we take home every night. And I'm like, yeah, you do. Those are dailies. So why don't you want a monthly backup? Well, why would we care about a monthly backup? Everybody, this is a visual thing, okay? And for those of you that are not with us on St. Thomas, I'm going to do this rare thing where I show my geeky Ray-Ban glasses. I'm going to turn my stuff up here. Everybody see this? Okay. So what I'm going to do is do something in the air to gesture each day of the week. And I want to see if you can get this, because I don't have a whiteboard in front of me. But let's say I have an external disk that I do backups on from Monday. Are you with me? Monday, it's right here. And then here's Tuesday, and here's Wednesday, and here's Thursday, and here's Friday. Everybody with me? Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And I have 5 disks that I use. And what do I do the next Monday? I use the same disk again, right? So what I do is I take Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then, because I'm just a whiz at saving money, right? Everybody loves saving money. I reuse the disks. And I overwrite what I've done. So now I've got Monday, nope, a week later, now I have this Monday. I don't have last Monday. Tuesday, oh, well, no, I don't have last Tuesday. I have this Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Now, what happens if you had a meeting with your boss's boss's boss week before last Thursday, and it was about your budget? Do you have that data and that information anymore? Just for saving money. If you don't keep a weekly, if you don't keep a monthly, if you don't lay out the money for this, what you need to do in risk management in simple terms, and I'm going to show you lots of slides, and it's going to be like a blur, but this is the part I want you to remember, is that you're going to help people make informed decisions about simple things where you communicate the risk in money terms. Money, money, money. There was a famous movie not too long ago, Cuba Gooding Jr. Show me the money, show me the money, show me. You know what I'm talking about. Show me the money, right? That's what this is about. Risk management is about helping people understand, okay, we'll skip. Here's what you do in email. And this is a great scenario based on what I just described for you, this scenario. You go and you say, I'd like weekly disks too. Why do you need it? Why do you need a disk for each week? Because every Friday I want to have a snapshot from the week. Why? Well, because that meeting last week before Tuesday, I still got it on that disk. But I don't have it on this Tuesday's disk. because I overwrote that with last Tuesday's backup and this Tuesday's backup. I don't have week before last Tuesday no more. People just don't understand that. And they go, well, how much are those? And you're like, $80. You're like, okay, well, is that all you're going to need? No, I want one every quarter. Every 3 months, I want an extra set of discs, so I take a snapshot every quarter. Why? Because we post quarterly financials. We report to stockholders. We have things we have to do every year. What else? Once a year. I want one disc I put in a safety deposit box each quarter and once a year. Why? Well, you tell them in plain English. Okay, we can go to Office Max and buy a $75 external disc for this week. Or if we have a problem and you ask me to recover what's happened the week before last, the month before last, the quarter before last, the year before last, and those files have been overwritten, there's a quick story about how every single institution, without fail, look at me. This is one of those moments where if you were in middle school and I was one of yours in the household, I would take hold of both sides of your head and by the ears, and I would say, look at me, right? I would do that kind of thing. And I would say, every single institution that has lost its primary data within 18 months has gone out of business without exception. Every last one in the history of mankind, regardless of nation, regardless of whether it's a for-profit organization or it's a nonprofit or it's a small business, if they lose the data they need to do their job, they close the doors. That's what's been happening in the last 15 years. So what happens with the hacker? Well, the hacker knows they got you over a barrel. What's the best defense? A $75 external disk where you invest, you explain to people, okay, here's what you can't make payroll. Here's the trade-off. In risk management terms, let's put it in plain English. $75 for supplies, or nobody gets a paycheck at the end of the week because something went boom. Which one do you want to face? Which scenario do you think is going to be good for this business? And they'll say, oh, don't be melodramatic. And you'll say, on the contrary, I am quoting science. Here it is from the University of the Virgin Islands, CSC 220, Chapter 4, Risk Management. Here it is. Here's the formula. Here's the algorithm. Here's how you calculate what it costs. I rest my case. I'm not being melodramatic. I'm giving you what you need. Now, if you want to sign off on this, like some kunamunu, it's like, yeah, we'll just go, no, we don't need that. That's too much. That's too complicated. That's what's going to happen, right? Okay. Now, I am really going to blitz these slides. The main point is risk management. There are a couple of things you need to be able to do very well, very simply, very effectively. Most of this stuff you don't have to pay attention to. It's the OMG, here's what it is in plain English kind of thing. Okay. So we just explained how risk management is important. Okay. They have a framework for risk management, just like they have a framework for security controls, right? And they have a process model, and they explain all the different phases and steps of risk management. Oh, and you have this investigation analysis phase where you figure out, where are we the most exposed and what are our greatest assets? One of the key things that you have to identify is what are your mission critical assets? Okay, I'm going to turn the camera off at this point because I don't think I'm doing anybody any favors. And it takes up bandwidth and it's going to add to the size of this video. All right, so your risk appetite. Some people are risk takers. They're like, roll the dice. I go to Vegas 4 times a year. I don't care, right? So for some people, risk management is a different scenario simply because their risk tolerance is different. And that's what risk management is about too. You might be in an organization where it's like, okay, we got to put all our assets in this arena and not so much in that one. You got to identify how you identify risk, but most importantly, assess based on likelihood and impact. It's 4.5 where the rubber meets the road. 4.5. What is the likelihood and when it happens? Not if it happens, when it happens. What is the impact? If the impact is, okay, we buy a new disc. Boo-hoo. Why are we worried about it, right? So that's part of what we're dealing with here. Now, upper management is responsible for overseeing. Typically, it is the chief financial officer and the CEO that are most concerned with risk management, because if something goes boom and the organization goes out of business and they stop operating, whose fault is it? Well, it usually has something to do with the money people, and it usually has something to do with the administration, right? Upper management. Security governance, we've already talked about that. To keep up with the competition, organizations must design and create safe environments. Here's a thought. If your competition understands risk management better than you do, you're screwed. I can't be any plainer, and I don't want to put that in the textbook, but those are the facts, right? You're screwed if your competition understands the risk management scenario better than you do. Because what? Now they know where your goat is tied. They know how to get your stuff. The environments where you have to maintain confidentiality and privacy, right? Sun Tzu in The Art of Risk Management, know thy enemy and know yourself. You need not fear the result of 100 battles. If you know yourself, but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat. If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. So we're talking about exposure. When is it going to happen? When it does, how bad is it going to be? How do we make decisions on that basis? Just that simple. Don't overcomplicate, right? Identify, examine, understand threats. Identify, understand assets. Do you know what your threats are after? Your gold. You know what your gold really is? Sometimes it's not the money in the bank. Sometimes it is your unique creative process that allows you to create the gold you constantly put in the bank. Put another way, the real gold is how you make your buck. It's not every buck you make every day, so many days a week. It's the knowledge and your business sense. You have a special formula. Have you ever seen the commercials with a formula for Coca-Cola is written on a grain of rice, which is inside a whatever, blah, 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 and it's swallowed by a whale, and all right, risk management framework number 1. So yes, of course, there's lots of layers to risk management, like ogres, right? The risk identification, risk analysis, risk evaluation, and risk treatment. What is your treatment? Is there a cost-effective treatment that will preclude or mitigate the possibility that the worst case scenario you can't afford to have doesn't happen, right? That's the key. You want to have a process where you identify, assess, and treat. In plain English, if you don't have management first to identify, assess, and treat, that's what the enemy knows. Identification, analysis, and evaluation of risk as initial parts of risk management is known as risk what? Assessment. When you identify a risk, you're assessing your risk. All right, the framework, the process, let's keep going. Oh yeah, lots of pretty pictures. It's a cyclical thing. Everybody see the cycle? Kind of looks like a hurricane, doesn't it? So you know what happens after the hurricane? People go, oh, we shouldn't do that again. And what do? They put the electric wires back on the poles. And they say, every time we have a bad hurricane, oh, we should put the electric wires under the ground. And then they get the extra money to do what? Put the electric wires under the ground. And what do they end up doing like 18 months later? Putting them back on the poles. And they put them on stronger poles. That's the key, right? Because there's lots of money we can save and we can use that for something else. And so the risk, you know, is, hey, we're going to go ahead and we're going to put up stronger poles. And 20 years ago, that made sense until we had Category 5 hurricanes with 175 and 185 miles an hour, 2 weeks apart in the same vicinity, 25 miles from each other. Unprecedented in the history of mankind. And we just saw it and went through it. Okay, wake up call. Can it happen? Yes. Will it happen? Yes. It's all a question. Well, yeah. So the trick is, what's the risk treatment? Is the risk treatment affordable? Is it something that we can do? You have this framework, design, implementation, monitoring, and improvement. What are we saying? The reason you have a framework and you keep going through this cyclical process is because the risk changes all the time. It used to be that some of this stuff wasn't that important. We have stronger hurricanes. All right, now, the communities of interest. You have risks. If your customers take the hit and the loss, my question to you is, how long do you think you'll have customers? Not long. You might be protected, but if your customers aren't protected, you're going to have a problem, right? If your customer data is with you and they're square, but you're not, you got to look at the whole picture. There's a systems approach here. You need an RM policy. We've talked about policies before and how critical it is, and how policy is the local organization's laws and regulations based on the governance, right? The risk appetite and tolerances. If you don't define the risk tolerance and appetite up front, your stakeholders will never be able to make a plain, simple decision of confidence. What am I saying? You need to look your CEO and your CFO in the eye and say, are you prepared to shut the doors for 2 weeks? What are you going to explain to the board when you don't have revenue for 2 weeks? How are you going to make payroll? What are you going to do to pay for retirement? How are you going to cover the health insurance payments at the end of the month? You're going to let that lapse? There are some things that you need to be able to ask, right? Those are things that people need to understand in plain terms. You know the tech. What you need to understand is where the bullseye is, and then you tell them in plain English what they're going to lose, which part of their cheddar or gold they're going to lose. That is risk management. And you have to have the stakeholders involved. They'll say, why do I care about this appliance that costs $5,000? And you say, you know how people use credit cards on that website? What percentage of our income comes from that website? And if they look at you like, man, you crazy. 100% of our income comes from that website. Okay. So let me ask you, if that site is down for 3 days, what do you lose? What do I lose? Over 3 days worth of income, right? Well, how much is that? How much is it? What are we talking about? The residual risk, right? You can do things based on your appetite and the treatment, and there's still residual risk. The trick is not to have everything you want. If you turn around and there's this, everybody repeat after me, FUD, 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 FUD. That stands for FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. This used to be a mantra in our industry, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Have you ever seen Wizard of Oz? Wizard of Oz. Lions and tigers and bears. Lions and tigers and bears. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. If you become that risk manager guru that is always spieling fear, uncertainty, and doubt, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, because you have to press for every little thing you want, it's going to boomerang on you. That rubber band will snap. So the trick is to find out the tolerance or risk threshold. And you say, look, it's not a perfect world. I know that we want a strategic planning retreat so we can find new markets. You got to have money to do that. I know you want to upgrade our warehouse, because our warehouse is getting old, and every time it rains, our supplies get wet. I know there are other needs you have, but you got to help people understand in plain terms what the trade-offs are, right? Now, when you implement the methods, you have a desk check method. That means you sit at your desk and you play through a scenario that's simulated. You also pilot test. You also have a phased approach, and then you can do a direct cutover. Now, what's the difference between these implementation methods? I have a quick story to tell you. We once hired a guy to come in to set up a $50,000 battery backup system that is as large as the room you're sitting in right now. It was a thing of beauty. And we wanted our data center to run for 6 hours before it even thought of shutting down because we had long outages. Sounds familiar, right? Stuff just cuts off. You want to have time. You want to get in there. You want to shut things down gracefully. How much time do you need? About six hours. What happens if you don't? Well, everything crashes because the power dies. Then you lose your data. Then you have to spend half a day after that getting the backups. If you have backups, restoring the data. If there are disks that have integrity left, there's all sorts. It's like a domino effect. It's like, oh my gosh, right? So we had this thing, and the guy said, "Here, we're gonna set up this. We're gonna do that. We're gonna check A through Z, and then when you're finished, this is how it's gonna work." That was the desk check. And then I walked over and I said, "Did you read your scope of work? Because you know what's coming next, don't you?" And he said, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "You're gonna stand in this room while I do this." And I walked over to the main breaker, and I reached up on the wall, and he said, "No, don't do that." And I cut that sucker off. And the entire campus on 5 sites for 1,000 users, 29 buildings went boom, and everything died. True story. True story. There's a guy that saved a bunch of people's lives on 9/11 for Morgan Stanley. This is also a true story. He knew because of the first attacks that it wasn't over, that somehow that Al-Qaeda was going to be back, and they were going to figure out how to really hurt us. So his name was Rick Rasorla, and he had a very simple philosophy. He said, "We're doing the real deal once a month. I'm just going to pull the alarm, and you're going to act like you don't have time to get the stuff, because guess what? You don't have time to get the stuff. You're not going to remove the external hard drive. You don't have time to shut down the computer. You can't pull the thumb drive. You have to leave now or you fry." And that's what he did every month. Now, he would do it when they had corporate annual meetings. He would do it when they had youth groups in to tour the place. This was the World Trade Center. He did this when they had like PTA groups coming through with the Parent Teacher Association, civic organizations. He didn't care when it was. He said, "If you don't know the drill, you're dead." And he did it faithfully for 5 years. He went back in over and over again on the morning of 9/11. But of all the companies that survived, they were among the few. There were a couple, everybody died. They went out of business. They don't exist anymore. Morgan Stanley is still here. It's still alive. It's still thriving because of Rick Rasorla. He did it. He did the actual cutover. The cold turkey, okay, if this really works, let's do it. Okay, I'm going to pull the plug. This is denial of service, baby. Does our backup internet work? How do you know? How do you know if 1,000 users can work on a smaller pipe out to the internet? Only one way to find out. The direct approach, right? That's where monitoring and review is concerned. A risk management plan is worthless. If you walk out of this class and you go, "Okay, now I know how to spell it out for people so they can make a decision." They're going to try it. Then they're going to have criticisms. The criticisms come from the fact that you're doing something new. There's something that efficiency experts have identified is called the J effect. The J effect. Everybody repeat after me, the J effect. Productivity decreases when you're doing something new. Always does. Until you figure it out and you get used to it. And then the productivity goes way up. If you don't prepare people and you don't tell them, watch my words, this is going to feel awkward. This isn't going to feel smooth, not at first. This isn't going to appear to make a benefit, but we're going to practice it and we're going to get it right. That's what you have to do. That's part of risk management, okay? So what else can we tell you about this? Establishing context, treating the unacceptable risk, summarizing the findings. You're going to get your stakeholders to understand, okay, what are the non-negotiables? What is unacceptable? We don't have screens, or we don't have data, or some hacker wants $1 million, or they won't decrypt our junk. That's unacceptable. That has happened to agencies in your government in recent years. Shh. They didn't tell anybody. but I hope they all tune into this YouTube video and somebody's paying attention, because it's long overdue. And there are simple things that people woulda, coulda, shoulda been doing for the longest time. And this is one of them. Risk management. You got to take it seriously. You have to advocate. You have to be the evangelist. You have to get excited and help people understand in real terms. It's like this. I'm going to put it in writing to the board that you're an idiot and we're all going to lose our jobs if you don't do this one thing, because it means not when, not if this thing will happen, but when. And you have to be able to put that in writing sometimes. The context in this phase is the understanding of the external and internal environments that you're interacting with. You have stakeholders. You have to be able to translate for those languages. There is a special publication that addresses risk management explicitly. It is 800-30. And if you remember one thing from this in your assessment, when I say what federal standard has to do with risk management process, what is your Bible from the US government? Everybody should say 800-30. And it's a newer revision, I think, by this point. All right, risk identification. This is kind of fun. You get everybody involved and you say, what are your risks? Did you know that the front doorman in your building has a totally different view of risk? Did you know that the secretary at the desk in the hallway has a totally different view of risk? Did you know that the janitor has a completely different view of the risk? A janitor can say, you know, when the power went out last time, the generator didn't kick? These servers got very hot. And when I walked in here, it sounded like a jet engine. And I thought the place was going to blow up. Did you know that a janitor can detect something like that when no one else does? Why? Because when the power goes out, everybody gets in the cloud, they get offline, they're not paying attention. You have to involve everybody in this process, right? Risk identification. Same thing for organizational assets. You would not think that a single thumb drive, could hold the fate of the Bureau of Internal Revenue on that single thumb drive. But there are cases where there are certain things where if you lose it or you don't have it, you can't do it. A login. You know what happens when you can't log in and you need that information? Okay.
You know that all type USB 3.0, any USB 3.0 port still has its data ports and the data prongs in them. So if someone tampers with a USB port in like a hotel,
Right.
airplane, any USB port, they could hack into your phone, any device that uses a 3.0 USB to charge it.
Sulaiman, that's a very prudent observation that you would know that the pins of a USB drive remain intact and that people can still hack. And we need to talk on the sideline here about that. I'm getting a little concerned about you because you seem to know some of those things. Anyway, Sulaiman's point is very well made. Here's what generates the most revenue, the highest profitability. You got to find what's the most sensitive. Sometimes it's not the highest generating amount. Sometimes it's the most catastrophic. Did you know that public relations in a nonprofit organization, if they get hacked and their donors get their identity stolen, like the video you just saw, guess how many donors are quick to open their wallets wide and help you the next time you have another budget cycle you have to fund? Zero. So is it your real budget or is it the donor confidence that's an asset? Sometimes it's things you don't perceive that are important that you have to protect. That's part of risk management. All right. We're going to go ahead and do like 3 more slides. Boom, 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 real quick, and then we're done. We classify our assets because there are some assets that are more sensitive than others. Okay, what am I saying? Some information, some resources are considerably more significant, or the damage to those could be more catastrophic, right? And you see this classification here. It's important for an organization to identify the things, the gold. Where is the gold? What's the real gold? not what you think the gold is, right? Then you rank order those things. You rank order, okay, what's the worst, what's the biggest chunk of gold? What's the biggest chunk of silver? What's the biggest chunk of bronze? What do we have to go after to protect each of those assets? They each have different impacts, and it's important to understand that there is a scale or hierarchy of assets that are most important. One of the most important that are misunderstood is human resources. In an organization, the most important asset that walks through the door every morning are the people that run the business. And that's true for most businesses, except folks who run the business get a little short-sighted of that sometimes. And it's your job, believe it or not, to help human resources understand the risk in tangible terms. Do you know what one disgruntled employee can do to you? This one person can scramble this data file, flush the USB that has the key to decrypt it, and walk out the door and hire with your competition for twice the salary. And you might as well call it quits, right? That's another thing about rank ordering. It's not always the physical, it's not always the software, it's not always the systems. Sometimes it's the human element. Do not forget your people. They are the key, like we've already learned, the key to understanding. When performing risk identification, which of these steps is performed last? Well, you identify them first, then you classify them and categorize them, but ultimately I would think prioritizing. Absolutely. Good job. Okay, with that, we're going to stop right here with the weighted table analysis of information, a lot of weeds, a lot of detail. What's the main thing? Best sermon I ever heard in my life was, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. And when it comes to risk management, don't forget what job number one is. Your ability to identify the assets, identify the risk, identify the measures that can prevent it, and then put that to people and say, okay, this is likely to happen once per year, at least. What's the cost of being out of business for a week each year? If we buy this thing that we can use for 5 years and it prevents one of those, business people call that a cost benefit analysis. You say, I've prevented the one thing, this gadget we bought, this defense control, paid for itself with one occurrence that didn't happen this year. And that's it. And so that's what you go after. You identify the things that are the most critical, and then you do not relent until people understand in very plain terms. Okay, I want you to sign off that when we lose $25,000 every year at the year 4 mark, I'm going to come back and look at the $100,000 we have lost. And I'm going to say, really? You couldn't spend 10 grand 4 years ago? Really? What's the difference now? You would have been $90,000 to the good. Really? We could have had salary increases. We could have had money to train people so they could go to conferences like Las Vegas, Consumer Electronics Show, CES, the biggest tech show on the planet, baby. I'm just saying, Black Hat, DEF CON, all of those things. How do you get the money for that? You help people save. That's how you do it. And then you have the money you can work with. Okay, enough said. I'm going to stop right now and we'll pick up on Wednesday. We have some practical activities to help you operationalize this risk management thing we're talking about. We want you to do the basic process of risk management. So we're going to throw some things at you. We're going to ask you to work this stuff we just talked about. Okay? All right. Any questions before we stop recording?